Welcome to this expert session brought to you by GSDC. At GSDC, we're dedicated to bridging the knowledge gap with globally recognized certification programs that shape the future of digital professionals. In this exclusive 20-minute session, we explore the powerful intersection of generative AI and cybersecurity. You'll hear from our subject matter expert as they dive into the foundations of AI, decision-making, and how these evolving technologies are transforming security landscapes. Let's see what our expert has to say about this crucial topic.
I believe you can. Say something if you can. So I'm super excited to talk about this topic, this intersection of cybersecurity and generative AI. My name is Jepson Taylor, and to give you an outline of what we're going to be covering today, I think one of the issues when you hear talks about AI is people just jump into AI and they don't really give the foundation. And so I want to start with a very strong foundation in decisions. It's also how I introduce myself. And we're going to talk about intelligence, and that will set the stage for talking about AI, and then cybersecurity and the future of cybersecurity because of these technologies and how fast they're moving. So I like to introduce decisions with something that's personal to me. This is where I live. I'm calling in from Utah. I like to say this is my Greek siren. So this particular mountain, when I see this, it calls to me. And I'm sure there's people, I'm not the only one. I'm sure there's people here that are looking at this thinking, I too would like to climb this mountain. But the problem with climbing this mountain is when you get at the top, you now have to make a decision. And I use this image to introduce the brain and decisions because this is an interesting photo because I'm stuck. I'm stuck at the top and I'm making a decision. In the video that's associated, you can actually hear me yelling. I'm quite frustrated with this decision I have to make. And the interesting thing is there is a war that's going on. I'm holding completely still and my heart is racing at 170 beats per minute, and which means something. It means the amygdala, the primitive part of the brain, think of that as the lizard part of the brain, thinks we're going to die, and is competing with the mammalian part of the brain, the neocortex, that knows it knows we're going to die. It got over that, but it doesn't think we're going to die today, and it's simulating a sequence of future events, trying to determine if I have sufficient experience to execute them without long-term consequence. And if you think about it, we make tens of thousands of decisions every single day. We take them for granted. You don't really think about walking down the stairs, going left, going right, eating this versus that. But these decisions are driven by our experience. And I gave something away with a question I was going to ask the audience, but let's pretend that we were making bets. What would you use to determine if I could get down this mountain safely? Well, you have to determine if I have enough muscle memory or experience to get through that. And if I was a beginner, then I think most of you would bet the other way, that I'm going to have long-term consequence. And experience is a through line or theme that will exist through this entire talk, and it's something that I encourage you to think about with yourselves, with your own experience. So real quick, I'm going to talk about this is a brief collage of my career. I'm going to talk about the AI and the machine learning lessons, but I'm also going to talk about the security lessons along the way. So something that shaped my experience is I'm very obsessive and I have a disregard for the rules. And that showed up when I went to college. I was living in the snow in the woods. And so 15 below zero Fahrenheit, taking 19 credit hours. I was doing this because I didn't want to pay rent. And this is actually why I learned how to program, because it was before social media. It's 2003. It became national news in the US. And so I was on TV, radio, talk stations, and reporters. And so I had to learn to program because I had to have a blog, which is so funny. So me programming in AI and high performance computing, it all started with HTML and CSS because there was no Facebook, there was no social media at the time. And that developed into PHP, the LAMP stack, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP. And then that developed into computer vision and high performance computing, and now high performance computing with AI. So my experience started my programming experience started because of this ridiculous story of me living in the woods. But then I went and graduated from chemical engineering, and I worked for Intel and Micron. So there's two parallel tracks I want to talk about now. So one of them is security, and one of them is going to be consequence. So when I was working at Intel and Micron, this photo that you see here in the yellow, this was called the $1 billion room. And it was really exciting when I joined. It felt like working for Star Wars. The entire fab is automated, robots above. And at the time, I was dealing with data, everything you can imagine, from robotic process automation, process control, yield analysis, quality analysis, predictive preventable maintenance. So anything related to data and semiconductor, I dealt with it. But at the time, if I made a mistake, it felt like getting your hand slapped. It's not that big of a deal. Even if you do something that might cost the company hundreds of thousands of dollars, you won't be fired unless there's a pattern of that. And so every time I go through one of these experiences, the consequence of failure increases. So I'll finish this thread with AI, and I'm going to come back to security. So then after that, I joined a hedge fund working as a quant. And if you have a model that doesn't work as described, it's the worst day of your life, which I think is pretty funny because everything's relative. So the worst day of your life, it can always be worse. And after the hedge fund, I joined HireVue. So HireVue was an HR tech company. We were predicting video interview outcome, and I was their chief data scientist. And if you build a model that doesn't work, it can be the worst day of someone else's life. You can actually cause a class action lawsuit because there's adverse impact. You can propagate bias with AI. It actually is the default mode if you're not preventing that. And so consequence always increases. And then the final collage is me doing my own startup that I did for 3 years and sold to Data Robot. And if you have a model that doesn't work, you have to fire your friends. And they're both bad, but it's good. You learn lessons along the way. So starting over again, let's talk about security. So when I was at IM Flash, the Intel Micron JV working in semiconductor, a lot of these really expensive tools that were in the fab, these tools could be $100 million for a single tool. They were not appropriately patched for security. So you can think of some of these tools running Windows XP Service Pack 2, and that's fine. It is fine if they're protected inside a firewall. But I remember some security breaches that would happen through a USB. Someone brings a USB within that safety circle and they plug it in. And then you can imagine for a worm or for something, if it has access to hundreds or thousands of computers that are not patched, that is a huge problem. The other security thing that showed up when I was at the hedge fund is our supercomputing cluster. I remember, I don't know how long it was, maybe a week, it was compromised where it would begin, a hacker was able to get access to this massive GPU network and they were mining Bitcoin, which honestly, in the grand scheme of hacks or things that people could do, that's probably the least of your worries. You'd be quite blessed to find out that someone's mining Bitcoin on your network and not doing something that's more malicious. So continuing to experience, because I want to get into intelligence. As mentioned, I have worked for 2 global unicorn platform companies, Data Robot and Dataiku. It was announced last week that I am transitioning out of Dataiku. I am doing another startup in the generative AI space. And I'm also a part-time professor at NYU. I teach board members and executives about AI. So now actually getting into me to talk, thank goodness. So intelligence. So intelligence shapes our decisions, but I want to define what is intelligence, because this is going to be a very important foundation block for all of us as we talk about AI. So what is intelligence? Intelligence is defined as the acquisition of knowledge through experience, which gives us the ability to apply that knowledge for future decisions. And so if we take that simple definition, let's apply it to this butterfly. So if I poke this butterfly in the eye, is it going to avoid me tomorrow? Is it going to use that experience, that new knowledge, to make a different decision when it sees me? It's a simple enough life form. There's probably some uncertainty. It'd be interesting to take a poll from the audience. How many of you think that this butterfly will avoid me tomorrow? This would be a terrible study. We could do this to find out, but I would say it's a simple enough life form. Some of us are unsure. But then if we go up the animal kingdom, take something like a dog, for example, if I poke it in the eye, is it going to avoid me tomorrow? Absolutely. A dog and a cat, some of these animals, some of these other mammals are smart enough that potentially, if the experience is negative enough, they could remember that for the rest of their life. And intelligence goes in a lot of different dimensions, but if you oversimplified intelligence, you can think of one's ability to understand time and space. And so a dog could understand time potentially for the rest of its life. But you take a human, for example, and humans are remarkable. Humans are so different. And so maybe to challenge the audience for a second, why are we so different? No other animal comes close to what we can do. We can land rockets backwards. The stuff we do is unbelievable. So why? What's different? What if we gave a dog arms? Would they be able, and opposable thumbs? Could they do what we do? And the answer is no. The reason they can't do what we do goes back to the key part of intelligence. They can't transfer experience. So if I get poked in the eye, not only can I remember that forever, but I can tell all of you. We can tell each other. We can even tell a story in writing that will exist after we're gone. So intelligence through humanity is compounding. It just builds and builds and builds. And so if you think about yourselves, you can't take credit for how intelligent you are. You have to give credit to teachers, mentors, parents, friends, and all the humans that came before you that wrote all of the lessons in the books that you read. And of course, there's lessons that maybe have to be refined and corrected, but a lot of it is quite good. And so now 2 questions to ask. The first question, are you smarter today than when you were a child? And if you are, how much so? Can you quantify that? It feels difficult to quantify. 10 times, 100 times, it feels infinite, right? You're so much wiser than you were as a child. Now the hard question, the second part of that question is, are you smarter today than you were yesterday? And it's uncertain. Actually, the answer can, if I'm going back to betting, often we become dumber with time, especially if we're comfortable. The reason being we have bias. You have something called neural rutting. You become comfortable. We're creatures of habit. So your ability to innovate, your ability to think outside the box is actually potentially reduced if you don't interact with people outside your tribe. And so all of us today, we are interacting with people outside of our tribe. Please be very active in the chat, have internal dialogues with each other while this talk is going. And as I can, I will monitor the chat, and there will be some interactive parts of this talk where I will be forced to look at the chat. But this is how we learn, right? We find people that have different Euclidean distances than us on their experience vectors, and we try to collide and we try to find new ideas. So intelligence, continuing this and really setting the stage for AI. We're not ready for AI yet. We're going to talk about data. So just like you and I have life experience that allows us to make better decisions, a company has data experience. So data is flowing through a company. That is the lifeblood of a company, especially today. And it's interesting, even though data is our experience for a company, and a company is made up of people and process, most companies have 3 fundamental problems. So the 3 problems that most companies have are processes are stale, knowledge workers leave, and most data is not used for better decisions. That's where AI comes into play. So AI can actually address all of these. So AI can allow processes to evolve in a way that is not reckless, in a way that's responsible. AI can also reduce the amount of knowledge that's walking out the door when your knowledge workers leave, and AI can allow you to improve decisions using data to make better decisions for a business. We're living in a world today where AI does not have any limits on the data types that can be consumed. Before it used to have limits. Do you want to consume images, audio, time series, logs from the network? It was quite intimidating. But now there's no data type that gives any AI professional anxiety when it comes to building pipelines. And now for the security angle with this, your data flowing through a business, that is your experience, that's your moat, that is what makes your business work. And that is also the thing that's under threat when it comes to cybersecurity. That's something you definitely have to protect. So now I want to demonstrate how powerful AI is, and then we'll get into the AI foundation. So now I'm going to look at the chat because I want to challenge the audience. This is a particular project I worked on 7 years ago where I was teaching AI to play Call of Duty on the Xbox. And it was very important that it was a stock Xbox. So I'm tricking this Xbox. It has no idea that it's actually being played by an external supercomputer. And this external supercomputer, it's playing the Xbox by consuming the HDMI right off the Xbox that's going into an HDMI captured card that's being run by the supercomputing node. And then it's outputting the Xbox controls using a gimmicks adapter to go directly back into the stock Xbox. So this is interesting from a security perspective. How would you ever catch if someone was doing that? There's nothing, I haven't modified the Xbox, it's still a stock Xbox. And as far as the Xbox is concerned, there is a human watching and playing it. So from a security perspective, it is kind of a fun example. But now for the question. This is a marketing image that I made that was associated with that stunt. What was the cost? And this is in 2015, 16, I think. So what was the cost of, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So I met with a graphic designer at a coffee shop, and I drew a kid on the floor and a line that was a TV and a robot. And I said, I want you to come back with a design where there's a child playing a screen, and on the other side of the screen, there is this AI monster that is digitally trapped that we hope never gets out. And so the question for the audience, and I'll look at the chat now, how long did it take the human designer to design this? How many weeks? And then how much did this cost? Look at the quality of the piece and then come up with your guesses. I'm going to take a look at the chat real quick. Oh, here we go. Great. Oh, this is fantastic. I can have the chat up while I present. Apologize that it wasn't up before. 1 month. Okay, 3 months. You know what's funny about this? The higher the time, the happier the artist will be, because I'll tell them. 1 week. Oh, $100. Wow. So it looks like if I'm trying to estimate averages, it's averaging about a month, 250,000, a few $100. So maybe I overpaid, but I really like this artist. So the answer to this was 1 week, and it was $1,000. And this was the quality that they produce. So now for the next question. Oops. So study this and now ask me what was the time and what was the cost to produce this. And pay attention, this one's a little bit more complicated. There's some 3D effects. So this is another piece that I made. So now I'm going to look for new chats. What was the time for this one and what was the cost? 6 months, $2,500. 3 days, 300. Oh, so someone got it. This is a trick question. Are people okay on audio? Someone said they had a difficult time hearing my voice. I want to make sure other people can hear. Can someone confirm audio is okay? So this was made with Midjourney, which means it was in minutes and it was instant. Okay, so people are saying we can hear you, so it must be specific. Yeah, so what does that mean? I also want people to understand how much this would have cost a year ago. So a year ago, this would have, I understand looking at this piece because I've dealt with Unreal Engine and I've dealt with contractors that can do this quality of work. This is a nightmare to do. So this would not be one person, it would not be a week. This might be a team of people and it might take several months because of the 3D effects that you're seeing and the quality. And so this, I don't think I could do this for less than 20 or 30,000 historically, assuming I had to engage Unreal Engine developers. So what does that mean when we're moving this quickly? So now the analogy, because I know you're not that interested in art, maybe you are, but we're all interested in code. So look at this code that's being written. And it's not that important for you to get to know, to really comprehend the code completely or to bug check it or anything like that. But looking at this code that is being scanned from beginning to end, how long did this code take to write and what was the cost?
That was just a glimpse into the world of generative AI and cybersecurity, and there's a lot more insight packed into the full video. At GSDC, we bring you hundreds of expert-led sessions from global industry leaders designed to keep you ahead in your career. So here's the next step for you. Enroll now in the GSDC Generative AI and Cybersecurity Certification Program by GSDC with globally recognized certification. As a thank you for watching, use the exclusive discount code CERTIFIED20 to get 20% off your certification. Visit www.gsdcouncil.org and claim your certification.